All right, we're starting to fill up, so we'll just crack into it. And first and foremost, I'd just like to really thank everyone for registering their interest today to coming along. Extend you all a very warm welcome at these incredibly and, as you've no doubt heard ad nauseum, unprecedented times. We're genuinely thrilled that there's been such a strong response to this event, and hope that you'll find the discussion informative, useful, and hopefully a little engaging as well. I'm lucky enough today to be joined by two of our incredibly talented team members who'll help me work through these the implications of the current restrictions that are in place in Melbourne. So we've got Peter Hannon, who's a senior sales consultant and partner at CAINE Real Estate. Peter was the 2018-19 Rate My Agent Agent of the Year for the Eastern Melbourne. And he's also a committee member of the Real Estate Institute of Victoria's New Agents Division. I'm also joined by Megan Kimpton, who is a senior property manager with CAINE Real Estate. Megan is in fact so good at property management that she trains new agents she trains through the Real Estate Institute of Victoria, and she too is a member of that New Agents Committee. So just a brief overview of what we'll be going through today and the structure or format of the day. We'll work our way through a really quick presentation before moving on to the Q&A section of the presentation. Our presentation shouldn't really last more than about 20 minutes or so. You'll note at the bottom of the screen probably there's a Q&A tab. You can post questions in there, and you can also like questions that someone else has posted, and the more likes a question gets, the higher up the order it will get answered. Post questions throughout the course of the presentation, or if you've got any that are on your mind right now, just start putting them in there. Depending on how many questions we're asked and time permitting, we'll do our best to answer as many as possible, if not all of them. We might also chuck in a couple of polls if we get the opportunity. Just a final quick note before we get into the presentation. We might mention regional Victoria and more broadly Australia, but the focus of today is primarily on metropolitan Melbourne and the restrictions that are in place now, and how the interplay between them and what the impacts are going to be for properties located in metropolitan Melbourne and the markets moving forward here. So getting straight into it, over to Megan to fill us in on all the gloomy details of what we can't actually do at the moment.
Awesome. Thank you, Jake, for the introduction, and thank you everyone for attending. It's lovely to see so many of you here with us, and hopefully you enjoy what we've got for you today. So as Jake said, I'll be covering off on the doom and gloom. I'll try to make it as little doom and gloom as possible. There is light at the end of the tunnel, which I'm sure you guys will hear later in our presentation. So the first thing that I would like to cover off on is going to be just discussing what we can and can't do in relation to conducting in-person inspections. Unfortunately, as I'm sure everyone would agree, this is probably one of the most integral parts of our roles as property managers and as salespeople. This is what allows us to get buyers and potential tenants through your homes. Unfortunately, we won't be able to start doing this again until the 26th of October this year. In the meantime, what we are doing is sending as many photos through as possible. We're completing video inspections. We're FaceTiming potential tenants on the phone, showing them through the property that way. So we are doing what we can within our means to show the properties to as many people as possible, but we're going to have to wait until the 26th of October to actually get prospective tenants and buyers through your homes. So same deal for photographers and videographers. Similarly, unfortunately, in their industry, they're not permitted to go through and undertake these types of roles until the 26th of October. If your property is currently for lease or is going to be vacant in the next couple of weeks, your property manager will reach out to you and put a plan in place come October 26th, when we can start getting photographers through and what all of that will look like for you. So this one, evictions, this is what causes landlords a lot of stress, and a lot of the conversations I'm having predominantly at the moment are around this eviction moratorium and what that looks like for landlords. So as you can see here on the screen, this has been extended to the 31st of March 2021, so March next year. whilst this can be, you know, confronting and is a little bit worrisome for landlords, what I would like to point out with this is that this is specifically in place to prevent the evictions of tenants who are unable to meet their financial obligations as a result of COVID. So if we're looking at tenants who have lost their job or who are on reduced hours or reduced income or something like that as a result of the COVID pandemic, this moratorium is in place to stop those tenants being evicted. What I would like to make mention of is that we're still able to complete some of our normal property management tasks in the sense of ending tenancies for owners wanting to move into their properties. If owners are required to sell their investment properties, we can still undertake those types of tasks for you and end a tenancy. It's just a little bit more, there's a little bit more to it job-wise than there was usually, but it's definitely something that's still doable. So just wanted to point that out for you. Okay, so rent increases. This is, again, one that we get a lot of questions about. So as you can see on the screen, this one has been extended to the 31st of March next year. So what we'll be doing is, up until that point, all of your property managers will be doing an in-depth review of the market. We'll review what it looks like out there and how that specifically relates to your property. So come March 31st, we'll have a plan. We'll be ready and raring to go with those rent increases if that's appropriate at the time. So we'll keep you, you know, informed as to how we progress with that and what all that looks like come March 2021.
Great. Thanks, Megan. So, yeah, as Megan said, it's not all doom and gloom. Whilst there's some big ticket items there that we can't actually take action on or deliver for you as we normally would, there's still plenty out there that we can do, which involves one of the main ones, which is listing, leasing and selling properties. So while the vast majority of people, the renting and the buying public, will probably never purchase or lease a property without actually crossing the threshold of that property, there is a growing segment of people out there, of the market, that is actually willing to make that call based on other considerations. So things like advancement in technology is making, as Megan's identified, you know, the experience of virtually touring a property much closer to the real life experience of going through a property. There's still a huge amount of shortfalls in that area as far as we're concerned, and obviously backed up on numbers as far as the buying and leasing public is concerned. But that said, people are still, you know, a small segment are willing to make that call based off the digital experience of having a look at a property. Similarly, right now, there's, you know, some external considerations that people are making with regard to making a move, and that's based on, you know, the necessity of their circumstances, the opportunity for a good deal. Rents have come off significantly, not so much sales prices, etc., but people, you know, can perceive the market as presenting value, or they could be in a situation where they absolutely have to move and get out of a situation, whether that's interstate, regional, or intercity, for whatever, you know, circumstances that are contributing to that decision, and they're making the decision out of necessity. So, for example, in the past fortnight, we've been able to lease 5 properties completely sight unseen, without the tenants actually ever having been through the property. And we also sold a $1.5 million apartment, again, without the purchaser of that property ever actually having been to the property. So, and that's, you know, that's not a huge amount, obviously, but we're also not a massive business too. So as a proportion, it's probably sitting around the 10 or 15%, which is, you know, encouraging from our perspective that there is that willingness to go down that track. Exit and entry condition reports. Thankfully, the government saw fit to grant us permission to do this, and I suppose that's in recognition of the fact that for tenants that had already signed a lease on a new property or provided a notice to vacate, completing of either the entry or the exit condition reports is absolutely vital to them securing their bond and having that mobility, that ability to move. So we are able to do those, and they're also critical for the owners of the properties to, you know, measure up what the situation is in the current condition of their property, and assess and deal with any potential maintenance items coming out of that report there too. Pre-settlement inspections, the same logic applies here. If anyone has bought or sold a property at all prior to the stage 4 restrictions coming into place, then we're permitted to conduct a pre-settlement inspection, again, to ensure that the condition of the property correlates to, at the point of purchase as well. And so the settlements on those properties can go through. Essential maintenance. Now, this is an interesting one. This term is applied by the government, right? And it differs somewhat from the urgent maintenance, which is pretty clearly defined under the Residential Tenancies Act, right? So we're using a broader definition of essential maintenance because it's not as clearly demarcated what falls under it. So we would consider, that this term captures any sort of maintenance job that could contribute to or impact on the health and safety of a tenant in a premises, the condition on an ongoing basis rather than immediate, sort of threats, that the condition which might impact negatively on the experience, the quiet enjoyment of the property as well. So that's good in some respects, which we're trying to fit as much as possible as we can into the essential maintenance definition, but there are obviously still a lot of items that really won't fall under that, and we're also restricted by what the variety of service providers that we work with, which is a good large broad sample of excellent tradespeople, but they put limitations on what they're prepared to do because they're also operating under these restrictions as well. And then just the normal property management duties and responsibilities. So our team is based predominantly at home at the moment, but they're still performing all of those sort of day-to-day management tasks of property management that are essential to, preserving the quality of your property and ensuring that it's continuing to provide you with a return on your investment, residential income, rental income. So we're collecting rent, arranging maintenance works, completing virtual online routine inspections, resolving disputes, negotiating lease renewals, everything that we possibly can do that it doesn't require in person. And we've got a couple of our team members that have got permits under the permitted worker scheme who are out there providing keys, getting people in and out of properties, providing access for maintenance people, etc. as well. So, real terms, in truth, if anything, the complexities of property management have really ramped up since the outset of the pandemic. And as the sort of economic conditions have deteriorated, managers have been required to negotiate a huge number of rent relief agreements between owners and tenants, both parties of whom are distraught and anxious and financially threatened by the effects of the pandemic. In the vast majority of these cases too, it should be said, is that these agreements have been reached without the aid of or the lever that VCAT represents, because VCAT has become entirely overrun. It's been under-resourced and in truth, it's been an abject failure since the outset of this pandemic for both owners and property managers. So just a little salute from me to the property managers. My hat goes off to you for coping with the really tough conditions that we're all operating under at the moment. Now, what happens next? We've got a couple of different areas that we want to look at through this sort of, forecasting trends and impacts, longer term, short term, middle term on the property market. I'm going to get Pete to jump in here. He's going to talk a little bit about the easing of restrictions and the impact on the sales market.
Thanks, Jake. Yes, well, I know a lot of the people that I've spoken to recently are worried about the property or the price of their property and about home values and how badly it's been impacted by COVID. The good news is that really those early predictions, some of those extreme up to maybe 20-30% falls in property prices have really not been realized. And in fact, since March, which is when those first restrictions came in, and we've seen 4.6% fall in property prices. And if we look at that as a year to date, this time last year, was still up by 5.9% because the market did see such a surge and rebound after that correction of 2018. So it really hasn't been as bad as what people first expected. And we can look at what happened from that first lockdown and the easing of restrictions to try to get a little bit of an understanding of what might happen when we come out of this stage 4. Now, at the moment, private inspections are going to be allowed from the 26th of October. And we expect that at that stage, you'll see a lot of properties go on the market that have been in a situation where they've been holding and waiting. We are in spring. This is the main selling season. So that we do expect to see a lot of properties hit the market. If we look back to June and July, whenever we came out of that first wave, there was a massive surge of inquiry. So we hope that that's going to be what will happen again. There's still people that are out there needing to move, needing to buy for all the reasons that you spoke about earlier, Jake, in terms of there's plenty of reasons you've got to, maybe you've had a kid or whatever it may be, but you've got to go. So, and from the 26th of October, with those private inspections, it allows us to get people through the property. And then with all the new technologies of online auctions, we don't actually have to wait until the 23rd of November when, again, there's a second ease and we're allowed auctions of 10 people and so on and so forth. So that's a short term. And obviously we'll see when we come out exactly what the impact has been. From a long term, there's a couple of concerns we definitely need to look out for. Obviously, there's been a lot of fiscal support from the government, which will be tapered off. There's also a lot of people that have deferred their mortgage repayments, and at some stage, the banks are going to come calling. So once that comes to an end, we may see more distressed sellers, which there hasn't been any evidence of so far. And what that would look like, we would see a lot more listings. At the moment, there's record low levels of properties available. But if we start to see a lot more hit in the market, and not just because, it's spring and because obviously no one's been able to sell, there'll be a lot more than previous years. And we then may see some discount on those prices, and then we'll see some further decrease in values. But, no one can predict that. We'll just have to watch and see what trends come up as restrictions are lifted.
Great. I'm just going to read a quick excerpt from the introduction to an article that appears in today's edition of the Real Estate Conversation, which is, as you might have guessed, the real estate version of the popular The Conversation publication. Rentals near the city getting cheaper, CoreLogic. The onset of COVID-19 may be creating a two-speed rental market, with inner city rents declining faster than those in the outer suburbs, according to CoreLogic. So this goes to a discussion that we'll have regarding the trends shortly. But first, I agree 100% with Pete in his sort of estimation that as the restrictions ease, we're going to have a massive surge in activity. We're going to have a massive surge in inquiry and a massive surge in interest. What concerns me is that we will also witness a corresponding surge in available rental listings. Now, already at the moment, there's a lot of listings online that have been sitting there for a while because obviously circumstances pretty much prohibit or preclude them getting rented, unless they, for the reasons we've discussed earlier on. From a purely supply and demand perspective, all of the signs are, really hinting strongly that there'll be an oversupply. And when we combine that with the macroeconomic conditions of increased unemployment and underemployment, a withdrawal and reduction of the economic support mechanisms like JobKeeper and JobSeeker, and pretty much the decimation of the international student market, it's very likely that we're going to see this continued downward pressure on rental prices that we've seen across the course of the duration of the pandemic thus far. So what's of particular concern are some of the trends we're starting to observe, and that's to go back to that earlier reference to the article. The data referenced there that's being analysed by CoreLogic confirms what we're hearing from multiple sources at the moment. And maybe, Megan, you want to jump in here just to talk a little bit about vacancy rates, and what we're seeing in terms of trends there.
Yeah, absolutely. Jake's spot on, and I think that article does, lend itself obviously to what I'm going to speak to you about, which is the vacancy rates specifically. We've been able to access these vacancy rates via the Real Estate Institute of Victoria, so these are accurate as at this month. So just to give you a little bit of an insight as to what we're looking at. So if we look at the total of inner Melbourne, so that's CBD. Out to about 20 kilometres, the average vacancy rate is sitting at 4.5%. We can then break that down a little bit further. So inner, so CBD out to 4 kilometres, we're looking at a vacancy rate of 4.9%, which is obviously historically much higher than we've seen before. There's then quite a significant jump and a change in pace when we look at the outer areas. So when we look at outer, we're going to go probably from 20 kilometres out of the city further, so outer suburbs. In the outer suburbs, we're looking at a vacancy rate of 1.6%. So that's a really stark contrast between the 4.9 in the CBD and the 1.6% in the outer suburbs. What that says to us is that people are making lifestyle changes. As Pete, you mentioned before, people are starting families, people are making lifestyle changes, and we're definitely seeing that reflected in the statistics.
Pete, do you want to jump in there too and just comment, how that relates to sales?
Yeah, well, that coincides with the property values. The regional areas are outperforming capital cities across Australia. Now, a lot of that is down to migration. Obviously, the capital cities are affected more greatly by migration than the regional areas, but also the fact that there's just not that many people that need to be close to the cities for work anymore. Obviously, the offices are empty, especially in Melbourne. And they're making those lifestyle changes that, well, number one, it's more affordable out in those regional areas. There's a lot more space. And I think like never before, it's important. People want a backyard, a bit more space to run around. We've learned a lot from this pandemic. That's just like you said, Megan.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose, what concerns us is whether this is a trend for the long run. There's been a fair amount of research commissioned and performed by some of the larger companies in town that occupy some of the high-rise buildings there. And the results that I've seen presented show that whilst there is a small drop-off in what they, determine to be efficiency by their workers as a result of working from home, when they counterpoint that or coalesce that against the requirements of having their workforce return to high-rise office buildings in the CBD and the measures that will be taken in order to preserve safety, hygiene, etc., they see that there's a much better performance result from keeping their workers working from home. And these are kind of systems and requirements and processes that are probably going to be with us for a really long time, even post the vaccine, if we're lucky enough to be able to secure a proper vaccine. So that gives us concern that, stripping out that segment of the population that works in the CBD, which is a massive proportion within high rises, will also detract from that segment of the population that likes to live close to the CBD, and whether that's East Melbourne, Collingwood, Fitzroy, St Kilda, in the actual CBD, and so on and so forth. And if that remains the case for a long time, then we're going to have these higher vacancy rates. We're going to have these higher volumes of properties for sale, conceivably out for years. So we're really pitting our hopes a lot on the production of a successful and effective vaccine as well. So not great news, but nonetheless, it's not, as we've said, all doom and gloom. What the pandemic has done for a lot of industries, a lot of sectors, a lot of businesses, is forced an acceleration in innovations, forced an acceleration in the uptake of technological solutions, and forced creative thinking to solve problems that have been presented by the pandemic. And a lot of these innovations will stick. and a lot of them will have a really positive effect for landlords and sellers and buyers and tenants in the long run. So, Pete, I don't know if you want to talk about some of the things that have changed within the sales industry over the past 6 to 9 months.
Yeah, look, there's been a huge change, and even with some of these technologies that were there before, it's really advanced the consumers' comfortability with these technologies. Where, like, for example, even virtual tours or 3D tours, they've been around for quite a while, but I think that a lot of people, obviously, and they will still prefer to see the property, but as an initial first step, it really helps to get a view of the property and its layout. Obviously, online auctions have been widely talked about, and yes, although that when we can go back to an auction face to face, that will probably happen. I think these platforms will be adopted so that they'll be part of all auctions, because there's been so many times that we've had buyers that just couldn't make it there, interstate, overseas, just couldn't get there on the day for whatever reason. And this allows them a platform that they can bid in privacy. And I think that before this pandemic, there was a little bit of uneasiness about security, but now people feel safe, comfortable to do it, and how they've seen it happening. And I think that will definitely continue. Not only the online auction, but there's all these other platforms that have all come up where you can basically make bids throughout a sales campaign. And even it's not an actual auction, it's kind of more like a private tender, but it's all digitally. You can sign the contracts, everything's done online. So it's really fast tracking and making it a far more efficient process. One thing that we will find very helpful is actually the private inspections, and actually having the opportunity to really qualify the buyers that are coming through people's homes and properties. Obviously, we're all aware that you open a property for inspection, you get 50% or neighbours just having a bit of a look around. This has changed that. There's a bit less of just random people coming through a property. We really do get to get the information, what they're looking for. We get to ask the questions prior to the inspection. When are they thinking of buying? So we qualify them. And again, that's not going to change. I think that's that will stick to the future. So there's been a lot of these things will just continue, and it will help the industry.
Megan, anything from your perspective that's, things that have changed that are here to stay?
Yeah, look, I really echo a lot of Pete's comments. I think that not to be too optimistic, but I think one of the real positives that has come out of this is an increased level of efficiency. I know I speak on behalf of myself and the property management team at CAINE, but we're operating more efficiently than ever. We've got the drive to be completely paperless. We are, able to pretty much answer any question from anywhere. As you sort of mentioned, working from home has its difficulties if we're not able to access information, but we've got processes in place that we can access everything. So whether I'm at home or whether I'm at your rental property, if you need a copy of your lease, we're able to provide that for you. We've really made a concerted effort to be as efficient as possible, which we're really finding has had a great effect, and it's just really helpful and easy for our clients.
Great. And I'd just like to add on to what Pete said. I have a hope that what will come out of this is a massive shift in the sort of operational paradigm of our sector. And that's away from this real estate as sport, which it is in this city, and that's fabulous that people are so passionate and interested about it, no question. I don't want to dampen that enthusiasm, but as Pete's identified there, it can get in the way of genuine client and customer interaction, of the sophistication, of the nuance of communication, to really get to the nitty-gritty of what people are after. And I think this will, in the long run, if we can maintain this kind of one-on-one activity, that we can have people that are, deliberate in their search for a property, who are, whether that be for lease or whether that be for sale, who are open to communication, who are restricted really a different type of restricted, a restricted to having a dialogue with the agent, and the agent's therefore able to cater what they're presenting to that person, whether it be a prospective tenant or a prospective purchaser, exactly what they're looking for, to get a more intimate experience between agent and potential client or potential purchaser, potential renter. And that would be, that gives the opportunity for better results for owners of properties, whether that's leasing, whether that's selling. Because for those that are owners of investment properties, finding the right tenant with the right characteristics, the right capacity to pay, and checking all of those boxes before you place them or match them with a property is going to result in better outcomes longer term for your investment property. Less rental arrears, better care of the property, better upkeep, better reporting of issues, better communication, and just overall better results. Similarly, if we can work with buyers for properties that are for sale, that are motivated, who are genuine, who have the means to pay, and we can create competition by dealing with that smaller pool of buyers who are genuinely open to looking for that property, and we match them with the right property, then the outcomes again will be higher prices and less trouble, less issue, less drama for the person selling the property as well. So that's what I hope will come out of it. Anyway, that's enough from us. That's about half an hour. I went 10 minutes over. We went 10 minutes over. Let's get into some question and answers. I'm just going to get out of this and we're going to have a look at some of these questions. All right. So starting at the top of the list here, we've got 12 open, which is great. I'm sure we'll be able to get through them. I'm just going to delegate them out to either Pete, Megan, or I might take some myself. What government financial support is available for landlords? Not enough is the short answer there, but I might get Megan to jump in and just speak a little bit about this. There's two sides to the equation, the tenant and the landlord. They're okay. Over to you, Megan.
Thanks, Jake. So yes, not as much as we would like, I think is what we would say, definitely. The options we do have available for landlords, and obviously this is very specific to your situation. So this answer will have to be a little bit general in its nature, but if you do have specific queries, then contact your property manager and we can work you through the intricacies, of these situations personally. That said, the two main areas of government assistance, if you like, relate to a rental relief package for tenants. So if you as a landlord have offered your tenant rental relief as a result of a lost job or lost income due to COVID, there's an ability there for the tenant to be able to access the government grant. So dependent on the reduction that you have given them, this allows them to claim up to $3,000 through this grant. There's a few specifications on whether the tenants qualify. So they need to have a specific household income and under a specific amount in savings. So there's a few little hoops to jump through with that one. However, that is what's available on the tenant side. As a landlord, you have other options too in relation to a reduction in your land tax. So this too is dependent on the amount of the rental reduction that you've offered the tenants. This too is applicable if you have a vacant property. Again, these ones are general, so you are better off to speak to your accountant to get specific information on your land tax and the requirements that you have for that. If there's documentation that you need from us, obviously we can provide that for you easily.
Awesome. Thanks, Megan. Pete, this one's for you. Another goodie. Is it still a good idea to auction your property?
Yeah, thanks, Jake. Look, I'd say with any property and sales strategy or campaign, it's not one size fits all. Different properties will be better for auction, some for expressions of interest, some for private sale. Obviously, right now, with no private inspections, I would say not to. Without being able to get people through the property initially, I doubt that we're going to have a very successful auction. When those private inspections are allowed, yes, again, we're not to have on-site auctions, but if it's the right property, I believe an online auction could be very effective. But again, we'll look at each case and the property where there's going to be strong demand, and we'll certainly take an online auction and go for that sort of campaign.
And I'll stick with you, Pete, for a second. Should I be thinking about selling my investment property?
Again, it's a very specific on why they would be selling, when. Obviously, as we've talked about so far, there is certain restrictions still in place about one of the reasons to evict a tenant if we wanted to go down that road. And often we do suggest that a vacant property for the purpose of styling and staging and a sales campaign, that we do move the tenant on. That can be a bit tricky right now, and we'd have to look at that and see how long that may take. But yeah, look, as I said before, the market really hasn't come back as much as what was initially expected. And if you were to sell that property, let's say, for example, you were possibly selling an investment property because you were looking at buying something larger, maybe a bigger home for your family, and that money was to help towards that, well then, yeah, 100%, like we'd look at that, and if that could do that, well, there's no reason why you wouldn't. It's case by case, Jake.
Yeah, absolutely. The prime considerations there is, what's the longer term aspirations for the asset? What's your return on investment? Can you get a better return on investment somewhere else with some different form, the different asset class? Yes, no. There's a whole variety of questions that need to be answered. Generally speaking, and I think just to go back again, this is all just general comments. Pete, I'm sure you mentioned it, or you may have, that where we are today is still almost 6% higher than we were last year.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, look,
so your asset today is still worth more than it was 12 months ago, and we're in the midst of the most unprecedented, event in a century. So again, it reinforces, I suppose, the historical and seemingly continuing strength of real estate as an asset class. The future's uncertain, but if you were to sell today, there's every chance that you will sell for a higher price than you would have last year, which I know seems to defy logic given the circumstances, but that, based on pure metrics, that is the calculation that, you should have in your head. Pete, did you want to say something to that?
No, you've said it.
Okay, cool. All right. Should I start advertising my rental property now or next month? Great question. I think between Megan and I, we can answer that one for you. I'd say no. I wouldn't say no if you really wanted to. If you were asking me personally, and I was working in leasing throughout all of March and just up until the last month or so. So I've got some really recent experience in regard to this. As I said before, I'm concerned about a glut of properties coming on. There's already a glut, really. I mean, it's just by virtue of the circumstances we're in. Of course, we can't get tenants to take those properties. But for instance, in Melbourne, there's Melbourne's postcode 3,000. There's currently 5,000, almost 5,000 rental properties available, and that number's going to jump when the restrictions. There's certainty about when the restrictions are easing and what that's going to look like, or more certainty than we have today. I would be advising any owner that's approaching a vacancy, or that his property is becoming vacant in the next couple of weeks, to sit tight and reassess. We are looking at each property individually. In the past, where we just go East Melbourne, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, 1 car space, beautiful. We'll pop her up. We'll have 50 people through on the weekend. We have to be so much more careful, right? It's from our perspective, it's do it right the first time. So we need to be much closer to the date, of availability, or in this case, right? Because it's not availability, it'll be much closer to the date that we've got some surety around getting people through the property. Then we're going to have to look at what else is available. We're going to have to look at the price point, and we're going to have to be, brutal. We're going to have to weigh up whether or not holding out for a higher rent is going to pay the same dividends as being aggressive in terms of pricing the the property competitively and getting someone in there now. If as we suspect there's going to be an oversupply of properties, there's going to be an undersupply of tenants, and then within that there's a segment of the tenants out there that we want to capture, that have got secure employment, demonstrated secure employment, that have got exceptional rental references, have got exceptional professional and personal references. We want to get those people for your property, not just any tenant as well, because if we're going to cycle like this in and out potentially for months and months, if not longer, then we want someone who's got the right kind of job, who's got the right kind of employment record, who's got those right credentials, who's going to be able to keep paying that rent, even if it is lower, week in, week out throughout this period. So I would say hold off. Megan?
100%. I would say hold off as well. Jake's pretty much covered everything that I would have said on that point. The only thing that I will just throw in, it's a touch off topic, but just when we're looking at advertising properties and the timeframes around doing that, a lot of the conversations I've been having with our client base is too about being flexible. As we've talked about, we're in unprecedented times, so you have to take different measures than we would normally. What I mean by that is, considering whether we may go for a 6-month lease as opposed to a 12-month lease if we've got a tenant ready to go who's interested in a shorter lease term, or I've got a big client base who have got furnished properties, so we're weighing up the pros and cons of whether if we're able to be flexible with, if we have a great tenant who prefer it unfurnished, if we're able to cater to their needs. So I really would say the key aspect of this for any rental campaign is going to be that flexibility.
Absolutely. How about this one? So what restrictions are currently in place on getting people into repair or paint vacant properties? Yeah. Do you want to jump in, Megan?
This one is difficult because, as Jake sort of touched on earlier, what's considered to be essential maintenance, and those other bits and pieces. So I think it really is dependent on the contractor, on the type of work that you're wanting to have carried out, a range of different factors. So to give you an example, I've got a property under management currently that's being renovated. So those works had started prior or were organised to be started prior, therefore by virtue of that, they're able to go on and continue to do those sort of rectification works. We've also had, I've been hoping to get painting quotes and other bits and pieces, and we've been told by our contractors that we need to wait. So there's no real clear-cut answer on that. It really is dependent on your particular situation.
Yeah, so I'd answer it, just on the face of it. Technically, you can't, if it hadn't been organised or ordered before. Right? Two things on this. First and foremost is, as I mentioned at the front end, our peak industry body, the REIB, is in some areas successfully, in some areas less successfully, negotiating with the government about an easing of these restrictions, right, for our particular sector. There's really valid arguments to make from our perspective, and I'm certain from lots of other industries, about the capacity to perform a few more duties than we are currently restricted or prohibited from doing, like inspections, for instance. Similarly, having a property painted, even if that were hypothetically like an apartment, if it was one painter only allowed to do, or two painters observing a rule. So I can assure you that the Institute is working very closely trying to get some concessions here, because, as I assume the owner of the property who's asked this question is sitting there going, well, if I'm going to go into a compromised market on October 26th, and I've got no tenant in there now, I may as well use this time effectively and efficiently to get my property to a level where it competes really well against others or compares much more favourably. And that's the logical thing. And as Megan said, as we're all walking around our suburbs day in, day out, seeing building sites populated with people, yes, albeit restricted, it would defy logic to say that a vacant property couldn't have a painter go in and give it a freshen up between tenancies when nothing else can be done. Unfortunately, technically, I would say no on recording. off recording, I'd have that conversation about ways in which that might become an eventuality. That's all I can say in that respect. So let's talk about that offline. Okay, we've done that. We've done that. Does my landlord insurance policy cover me for lost rent during the pandemic? All right, Megan, one's yours again.
Awesome. This is a hot topic. This is something, again, that we are heavily discussing, in our day-to-day with all of our clients. So again, like my earlier answer, unfortunately, I'm going to have to be a little bit general in the tone of my response on this one, just because, this is so heavily weighted on the, obviously the insurer, number one, 2, the type of policy you have, 3, the wording of that policy, and 4, your particular individual situation. So, unfortunately, there's no clear-cut yes or no on that answer. So in some cases, yes, I'm sure there are. In some cases, unfortunately not. So this is something that I would really say, to discuss with your property manager. And hopefully we should have copies of your insurance policy on file. If we don't, send it through to your property manager, ask that question. We're here to help. We're here to do as much as, exploratory, figuring out, going through the policies and trying to work out what you are covered for. Unfortunately, as I said, it is individual, but please send them through, get in touch with your property manager, and we can make that assessment for you.
Absolutely. We've got a question here, and it's a great question, a really good question from one of our dear clients who is hopefully safely ensconced in the sun and eased restrictions of the Gold Coast. Hi, Robin. So what are owners' corporations prepared to do to assist owners with their body corporate fees, which will assist the owner investors who are relying on rental income for their income? Are they open to looking at ways that owners' levies can be reduced temporarily? Same for the Melbourne City Council rates. Do they have any strategies to assist ratepayers? Yeah, that's we're getting into. All right. We've had discussions with some owners' corporations around this, and the message back to us has been, well, we're doing everything that we always do. And, I respect that. They are, in essence, they're doing what they normally do. Of course, some of their activities are hampered and impeded by the restrictions in place. For instance, commencing works, scheduled works, etc., that are due to happen. And to be perfectly honest, the Melbourne City Council rates hadn't even considered until just now. So again, thanks, Robin, for that question. It's really salient and relevant. I expect that they will make a similar kind of explanation for why they can't do that. But I'm definitely going to raise that at the institute level and see if we can get a specific answer from council about how they can assist further. Because as we've already said, we are really, really unimpressed with the inequity of the support mechanisms that have been put in place for owners of investment properties, and that's commercial and that's residential. Commercial and residential property owners right now are hurting badly, and unfortunately, there's a PR problem just inherent in the term landlord. It's got these negative connotations, and it neglects the fact that the vast majority of our clients rely on that income to either service the debt that they've saved and sacrificed for to actually acquire the property, or to survive day to day, because that's their source of income, because they're self-funded retirees, or that's their only source of income because they too have been adversely impacted by the pandemic when it comes to employment as well. So the Institute has got a massive campaign. They haven't executed it well enough to my mind as yet, but to increase the support that's going to be offered to to landlords, because the owners of the properties right now have to carry the losses themselves on their own shoulders for like until March already. Until March, that's written in concrete, basically, that you guys out there that own properties are going to suffer. Megan, anything you want to jump in and add there?
No, I think you've covered it all. The only thing I did want to add, just really briefly, Robin, is that I have seen, and obviously this is again pretty specific to individual circumstances, but I have seen on some of our owners corporation notices that have come through, they're waiving interest and stuff like that. So if we had a client who found themselves in a situation where they were having difficulty to meet those to meet those commitments on time, or if they needed extra time or something like that, I have seen that owners corporations across the board are prepared to waive those interest charges. So again, not that that's, the be all and end all, and not that that's particularly helpful, but that is something that I have seen that's, I guess, just worth mentioning.
It doesn't help those people that pay on time, does it?
No,
yeah.
No.
Yeah. Another great question here, with high vacancies for inner city, will this push investors away and drive prices down? I've spoken a lot. Pete, do you want to jump in and have a
chat? Look, I think that the CBD is in particular risk of seeing further sort of price falls. There's been, at the moment, there's no evidence of it. And again, I think, like I said before, that's because a lot of people who may be struggling have deferred their repayments and are getting other support to help sort of pay their mortgages and are holding out for maybe better times ahead. However, as time goes on we've got no students, they make up a large population of the city. Again, migration, that those city apartments, if they remain empty, then we might start to see those come onto the market. And if there's a glut of anything, an oversupply, well then potentially we'll start to see some prices fall. But that's certainly a trend that we're keeping an eye on to see if that starts to happen.
Yeah, it's a genuine concern. It's a genuine concern that there might be some permanence to this shift. We'd not have been able to think of circumstances that would have shifted society away from this direction of higher density living, closer proximity to central hubs. It doesn't have to be that, it doesn't have to be the inner business district, but it can, there's been talk of models where there are other sort of hubs out in Dandenong and Frankston, and that communities will build around there, and centralized around those kind of hubs will be the most expensive, most sought after type of properties. And that's what the CBD has been for a long time. And we would have never predicted that we could be shifted away from that thinking wise, but that could be the product of this. If commercial rents deteriorate because, clients like Minters, EY, PwC, ANZ, don't have their workforces back into their, Docklands or CBD or Southbank properties, then the thousands and thousands and thousands of people that work there that want to be close to there will start prioritizing different things, as Megan said earlier on. And right now, what has appeal is space, is freedom, is not getting into an elevator with someone you don't know who lives on a different floor, whether that be for work or whether that be in your apartment building. And we're just hoping that, a vaccine will come and some semblance of normality can return. But it might be a case that, the tree change and the sea change and the suburban change, outer suburban change, becomes the direction that we move in the future. All right. So I think that is, thanks Rio for that question as well. That was a good one. I think that's all of the questions we've got right now. What current place paint? Yes. That's all we've got. We're coming in 4 minutes under time by the looks of things. I just want to say to everyone out there, thank you so much for attending this afternoon. Thanks for paying attention, for asking the questions, for broadening the conversation. We're incredibly, we feel incredibly privileged to have all of you amazing people as clients, that you've stuck with us throughout this pandemic. We're doing everything we can to ensure that your assets are being taken care of, that they're generating every single dollar of return that we can squeeze out of them. And although there's been a relatively negative sentiment to this entire presentation and conversation this afternoon, what we do need to hold fast to is, one, that point we made before about the strength of real estate as an asset class. Two, for the vast majority of people who are attending today, you own incredible property. You own property which, even in the midst of a pandemic, is of the highest quality. So that differentiates you from the vast majority of properties out there. When we talk about 5,000 available properties in Melbourne CBD, most of you don't sit in that category. You sit in a class above because you've made incredible decisions, you've purchased the right kind of properties, and there will always be demand for the right kind of property in the right location. And I think I can speak, for all of you in saying that you've all got exceptional properties in some of the most desirable, sought after locations in the world, not just in Melbourne, not just in Australia. So I hope you're all keeping healthy and safe. I hope it's not getting you too down, the restrictions, if you're stuck in Melbourne. The trends are good. The numbers are coming down. Now, if we stick at it, we should be able to get out of this and improve the way everyone's feeling and operating. So thanks again, everyone. Have a wonderful day, evening. Get in contact if you've got any additional questions. We're here to answer your questions. We're here to talk through things and problem solve as well. Any issues that might surface. Take care.